The blood trailing through the tall prairie grass caught Ryder Norwood's attention as he rode toward the western edge of his property, where the land rose into rocky outcroppings and scattered pines. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, snorted and tossed his head, sensing something amiss in the late afternoon air of Montana Territory in the summer of 1876. Ryder pulled his hat lower against the blazing sun and followed the crimson drops, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the rifle secured to his saddle. What he found near a cluster of boulders made his breath catch in his throat. A young woman lay crumpled against the rocks, her dress torn and stained dark with blood that had seeped from a wound in her side. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins and spread across the dusty ground like spilled silk. She was unconscious, her face pale as milk beneath a spattering of freckles, and for a moment Ryder thought he might be too late. But then he saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest and spurred into action. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground hard as he ran to her side. Kneeling beside her, he gently touched her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. The wound in her side looked like it might be from a bullet that had grazed her, tearing through flesh but missing anything vital if he was lucky. Blood had soaked through the fabric of her dress, a simple calico pattern that suggested she was not a woman of means. "Miss," he called out, lightly patting her cheek. "Miss, can you hear me?" She did not respond, her head lolling to the side. Ryder made a quick decision. He could not treat her out here in the open with the sun beating down and no supplies. His ranch house was a mile back, and he needed to get her there before she lost any more blood or before whoever had shot her came back to finish the job. He removed his vest and pressed it against her wound, then carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, and he wondered when she had last eaten a proper meal. Settling her as gently as he could across Copper's saddle, he mounted behind her and held her securely against his chest as he turned the horse toward home. The ride back felt longer than it ever had before. Every jolt made him worry about causing her more pain. Every moment that passed made him fear she would slip away before he could help her. Her head rested against his shoulder, and he could feel the heat of fever beginning to radiate from her skin. Not good. Infection was already setting in, which meant she had been out there for hours at least. Ryder's ranch house was a solid structure he had built himself over the past 3 years, ever since he had claimed this land and started running cattle. It was not much to look at from the outside, just weathered timber and a shingled roof, but it was sturdy and it was home. He had a small barn for the horses, a chicken coop, and a well that provided clean water. Beyond that stretched 2,000 acres of grazing land where his herd roamed, cattle bearing his brand, a simple N inside a circle. He brought Copper right up to the porch steps and dismounted carefully, lifting the unconscious woman into his arms once more. She made a small sound of pain, the first sign that she was still aware on some level, and he murmured reassurances as he carried her inside. The interior of his house was simple but clean. He had a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and 2 smaller rooms, one he used for sleeping and one that served as storage. He brought her to his bedroom and laid her on his bed, the only real piece of furniture he owned that could be called comfortable. His mother had sent the quilt that covered it all the way from Illinois, one of the few things he had that connected him to his past. Ryder lit the oil lamp on the bedside table and set to work. He had some experience with wounds, both animal and human. Living out here alone meant being prepared for anything, from a horse with colic to a gash from barbed wire. He heated water on the stove and gathered clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting, needle and thread, and the small bottle of laudanum he kept for emergencies. When he returned to the bedroom, he hesitated. To treat her wound, he would need to cut away part of her dress. It was not proper, but propriety would not save her life. He steeled himself and used his knife to carefully cut away the blood-soaked fabric, exposing the wound in her side. The bullet had carved a deep furrow through the flesh above her hip, but as he had hoped, it had not penetrated the abdominal cavity. Still, it was ugly and raw, and he needed to clean it thoroughly. He worked methodically, washing away the dried blood and dirt with warm water, then pouring whiskey over the wound. She jerked and cried out, her eyes flying open for just a moment. They were the color of pine forests, a deep green that looked directly at him without really seeing before they fluttered closed again. "I am sorry," he said quietly, even though he doubted she could hear him. "I know it hurts, but I have to do this." Once the wound was clean, he could see it more clearly. The bleeding had mostly stopped, which was good, but the edges were ragged and would need stitching. He threaded the needle with steady hands, though his stomach turned a bit at the thought of pushing it through her skin. But it had to be done. Each stitch was placed with as much care as he could manage, pulling the torn flesh back together. She moaned and shifted restlessly, but remained unconscious throughout. When he finally tied off the last stitch, he sat back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The worst was over, at least for now. He bandaged the wound with clean cloth, wrapping it around her middle to hold everything in place. Then he covered her with a blanket and went to fetch water and more cloths to cool her fever. For the rest of that evening and into the night, Ryder sat in a chair beside the bed, changing the cool compress on her forehead and watching for any changes. He had given her a small dose of laudanum to help with the pain, hoping it was not too much given her weakened state. His own exhaustion pulled at him, but he refused to sleep. He kept thinking about how she had ended up on his land, wounded and alone. There had been talk in town lately about a gang operating in the area, robbing stages and homesteads. Had she been caught up in that? Or was it something else entirely? She was beautiful, even in her current state. He found himself studying her features in the lamplight, the delicate arch of her eyebrows, the curve of her cheek, the way her lashes lay dark against her pale skin. There was something about her that stirred something in him, something he had not felt in a long time. Maybe it was just the protectiveness that came from saving someone's life, or maybe it was something more. He could not say yet. Near midnight, her fever spiked and she became restless, thrashing weakly and murmuring words he could not make out. He held her down gently, afraid she would tear her stitches, and continued to cool her skin with damp cloths. At one point she called out a name, Sarah. But whether it was a sister, a friend, or someone else, he had no way of knowing. By dawn, the fever had broken slightly and she fell into a deeper, more peaceful sleep. Ryder finally allowed himself to doze in the chair, his head tilted back against the wall, one hand still resting near hers on the bed. He woke to the sound of chickens squawking outside and sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, he was disoriented, then remembered everything in a rush and looked at the woman in his bed. She was still asleep, but her color was better, no longer that deathly pale. He checked her bandage and was relieved to see no fresh blood had seeped through. His body ached from sleeping in the chair, and he needed coffee desperately. He stepped outside to take care of the morning chores, feeding the chickens and checking on Copper, who he had left tied to the porch rail all night. The horse nickered softly as Ryder removed the saddle and bridle and led him to the small corral with fresh water and hay. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and pine. In the distance, he could see some of his cattle grazing peacefully. Everything seemed normal out here, but he kept thinking about that blood trail, about the bullet that had torn through her side. Someone had tried to kill her, or at least hurt her badly, and until she woke and could tell him what happened, he would remain on edge. He made coffee and fried some eggs and bacon, eating quickly at the small table while listening for any sound from the bedroom. When he had finished, he fixed a pot of broth from beef bones he had stored, thinking she would need something easy to digest when she finally woke. It was late morning when he heard a sound from the bedroom, a sharp intake of breath followed by a confused whimper. He hurried in to find her awake, her green eyes wide and frightened as she looked around the unfamiliar room. "Easy now," Ryder said, keeping his voice low and calm as he approached. "You are safe. You are at my ranch. I found you injured on my land yesterday and brought you here." She tried to sit up and gasped in pain, her hand going to her bandaged side. "What happened? Where am I?" "Montana Territory, about 5 miles outside of Granite," he said, pulling the chair closer to the bed but maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Ryder Norwood. This is my land. You had a bullet wound. I cleaned and stitched it up. You have been unconscious for almost a full day." Her hand trembled as she touched the bandage, and he could see her trying to remember. Her face was still pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but she was alert and coherent, which was a good sign. "I do not remember," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I remember riding. There were men. They were chasing someone or chasing me." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "It is all confused." "Do not push yourself," Ryder said. "Your memory will come back. Right now you need to rest and heal. Are you in much pain?" "Yes," she admitted, her eyes glistening with tears she was trying to hold back. "It burns." He fetched the laudanum and helped her take a small dose, then offered her water, which she drank greedily. When she had finished, she lay back against the pillow, exhausted from even that small amount of effort. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Emma," she said after a moment. "Emma Zimmerman." "Well, Miss Zimmerman, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need to recover. I do not have much in the way of accommodations, but the bed is comfortable and you will be safe." "I cannot impose," she said weakly. "You have already done so much. You are not imposing. I could not leave you out there to die. Besides, you are in no condition to go anywhere right now." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt something shift in the air between them. Her eyes were full of gratitude and something else he could not quite name. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved my life." He felt his cheeks warm and looked away. Just doing what any decent person would do. Over the next several days, Ryder fell into a routine of caring for Emma. He changed her bandages twice a day, keeping the wound clean and checking for signs of infection. He made her broths and soft foods, gradually working up to more substantial meals as her strength returned. He helped her sit up in bed, propping pillows behind her, and later helped her take a few steps around the room, when she grew restless from lying down so long. It was awkward at first, this forced intimacy of caring for someone he had just met. But Emma had a warm way about her that put him at ease. She thanked him for everything, even the smallest gestures, and when she smiled, which grew more frequent as she felt better, it lit up the whole room. They talked during those long hours, sharing stories about their lives. Emma told him she had come from Illinois, not so different from his own journey west. She had been traveling with a family friend to meet her brother in Virginia City, where he worked in the silver mines. But their wagon had been attacked on the road by bandits 3 days ago. The family friend, an older man named Mr. Peterson, had been killed. Emma had managed to escape on one of the horses during the chaos, but one of the bandits had shot at her as she fled. She had ridden hard, not knowing where she was going, until she had grown too weak from blood loss and had fallen from the horse somewhere in the wilderness. "I thought I was going to die out there," she said quietly one evening as Ryder spooned broth into a bowl for her. I remember thinking this was it, that no one would ever find me, that my brother would never know what happened to me. You were lucky I was checking that part of the property, Ryder said. I do not usually go out that far on a weekday. Not luck, Emma said, looking at him with those striking green eyes. Providence. I prayed, right before I lost consciousness. I prayed that God would send someone to help me. Ryder was not a particularly religious man, but he did not argue with her. If it brought her comfort to think that way, who was he to say otherwise? He told her about his own journey west, how he had left Illinois 5 years ago when he was 22, seeking land and opportunity that the crowded East could not provide. He had worked various jobs, from ranch hand to freight hauler, saving every penny until he had enough to claim his own land and start his own operation. It had been hard, lonely work, but he loved it. He loved the freedom of it, the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Emma asked one day as she sat propped up in bed, looking much improved. The color had returned to her cheeks, and she could move without wincing quite so much. Ryder considered the question as he stood by the window, looking out at his land. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I keep busy enough during the day, but the evenings can be long. I ride into Granite every week or two for supplies and to see friendly faces, but I have always been more comfortable alone than in crowds." "I cannot imagine living so isolated," Emma said. "I grew up in a town where everyone knew everyone. There was always someone to talk to, always something happening." "What made you want to come west then?" Her expression grew sad. "My parents died last year, influenza. My brother Robert left for the mines 2 years before that, and after I lost mother and father, there was nothing keeping me in Illinois. Robert wrote to me, said he was doing well, and that Virginia City was a place where a person could make a fresh start. So I sold the house and decided to come." "I am sorry about your parents," Ryder said. "Thank you. I miss them terribly, but I like to think they would have approved of me having an adventure, striking out on my own. My mother always said I had a pioneering spirit." She smiled sadly. "I just did not expect the pioneering to be quite so dangerous." As the days passed, Emma grew stronger. Soon she was able to walk around the house without assistance, and Ryder moved out of the bedroom to sleep on a bedroll in the main room, giving her privacy. She insisted on helping with small tasks despite his protests, folding laundry and helping prepare meals when she was able to stand for short periods. Ryder found himself looking forward to their conversations more than he wanted to admit. Emma was intelligent and well-read, and she had a quick wit that caught him off guard sometimes. She could discuss everything from literature to politics, and she was genuinely interested in learning about ranching and the land. He showed her his small collection of books, and she read to him in the evenings, her voice soft and melodic as they sat by the fireplace. One evening, about 2 weeks after he had found her, Emma was sitting in the rocking chair he had brought in from the porch while Ryder worked on mending a bridle. She had been quiet for a while, just watching him work, when she suddenly spoke. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for your kindness." Ryder looked up, surprised. "You do not owe me anything." "Of course I do. You saved my life, you have fed me and cared for me, given up your own bed. Most men would not have done that for a stranger." "Most men are not as decent as they should be," Ryder said simply. "Still, I want to do something. Perhaps when I am fully healed I could work for you for a time before I continue on to Virginia City. I could cook and clean, help around the ranch." Ryder set down the bridle. The thought of her leaving had been growing in his mind lately, an unwelcome presence that made his chest feel tight. He had grown accustomed to her presence, to the sound of her voice and her laughter, to seeing her face across the table at meals. The house would feel empty when she was gone. "You do not need to do that," he said. "But if you want to stay on for a while, I would not object. Truth be told, I have enjoyed the company." Emma smiled, and it reached her eyes, making them crinkle at the corners. "I have enjoyed it too, more than I expected to." Something passed between them then, an acknowledgement of what they had both been feeling but had not voiced. The air felt charged, heavy with possibility. Ryder looked away first, uncomfortable with the intensity of his own emotions. As Emma continued to recover, she proved to be an excellent cook, far better than Ryder with his simple bachelor fare. She made bread that was soft and golden, stews rich with vegetables from the small garden he kept, and even a pie with dried apples that he had stored. The house began to smell like a home rather than just a place where a man slept and ate. She also proved to be fearless in ways that surprised him. When he was working with a young horse he was training, she came out to watch and asked intelligent questions about his methods. When he was branding cattle with the help of 2 ranch hands he employed part-time, she did not flinch at the smell of burned hide but instead asked to learn about the different brands and how the ranchers kept their herds separate. "You are not like most women I have met," Ryder said one day as they rode out together so he could check on the northern pasture. Emma was riding a gentle mare, her wounds healed enough now that she could sit a saddle, though he could tell she was still sore. "Should I take that as a compliment or an insult?" she asked, but she was smiling. "A compliment, definitely. You are not afraid of hard work or getting your hands dirty, and you actually seem interested in ranch life." "I like it out here," Emma said, looking around at the sweeping landscape. "It is beautiful in a way that is completely different from Illinois. Everything is so big, so open. It makes me feel small, but in a good way, like I am part of something much larger than myself." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses picking their way carefully over the rocky terrain. Ryder pointed out landmarks, showed her where his property line was, explained how he rotated the cattle between pastures. Emma listened intently, asking questions that showed she was really trying to understand. When they stopped to let the horses drink from a creek, Emma dismounted and walked to the water's edge, kneeling down to splash the cool water on her face. Ryder watched her, admiring the way the sunlight caught in her hair, turning it auburn and gold. She looked happy, truly happy, and he realized that he wanted to keep seeing that look on her face. "Emma," he said, and she turned to look at him. "I know you have plans to go to Virginia City to meet your brother, but I want you to know that you are welcome to stay here as long as you like. No obligations, no expectations. I just enjoy your company, and if you are not in a rush to leave, I would be glad to have you stay." She stood up slowly, brushing off her skirt, her expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you never marry? A man with your own land, your own home, you must have had opportunities." Ryder shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the personal question, but feeling like he owed her honesty. "I suppose I was always too focused on building this place, on proving I could make it work. And the few women I met in town, well, they did not seem interested in the life of a rancher's wife. It is hard work, isolated, not very glamorous." "I think it is plenty glamorous," Emma said. "Just a different kind. There is beauty in honest work, in building something that lasts. You really believe that?" "I do." She walked closer to him, and he could smell the scent of soap and sunshine that clung to her. "Ryder, these past few weeks with you have been some of the happiest of my life, despite the circumstances that brought me here. I feel at peace here in a way I have not felt since my parents died." His heart was hammering in his chest. "Does that mean you will stay? For a while longer, yes. I should send word to my brother so he does not worry, but I would like to stay if you truly do not mind." "I do not mind at all," Ryder said, and he could not keep the smile from his face. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Ryder's life. With Emma there, the ranch felt complete in a way it never had before. She threw herself into learning everything she could, from tending the chickens to helping him doctor a calf that had gotten tangled in barbed wire. She was not afraid to get dirty or tired, and she laughed often, a sound that made his heart feel light. They developed an easy rhythm, working together during the day and spending the evenings reading or talking by the fire. Ryder found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about his dreams for the ranch, his memories of his family back east, his fears and hopes. Emma shared her own stories, her own dreams. She had always wanted to write, she told him, to document the stories of people's lives. She had filled journals back in Illinois with observations and small sketches of daily life. "I would love to read them sometime," Ryder said. "They burned in a fire at the boarding house where I stored my things before I left," Emma said sadly. "Everything I owned except what I could carry. That is why I had so little with me when I was traveling. I am sorry, that must have been hard." "It was, but maybe it was meant to be, clean slate and all that. Maybe I am supposed to start documenting a new life, a Western life." "You could write about ranch life," Ryder suggested. "I bet people back east would be interested in reading about what it is really like out here, not the dime novel nonsense." Emma's eyes lit up. "That is a wonderful idea. Would you mind if I wrote about this place, about you?" "I do not mind, as long as you promise to make me sound taller and more heroic than I actually am." She laughed. "You are already plenty heroic. You saved my life, remember." One night in early autumn, about 2 months after Ryder had found Emma, they were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out. The air had grown cooler, and Emma had wrapped herself in a shawl. They had been talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying each other's company when Emma suddenly grew quiet. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked. "I am thinking about how strange life is," she said. 2 months ago I thought I was going to die. And now here I am, sitting on a porch in Montana, feeling more content than I have felt in years. If someone had told me this is where I would end up, I would never have believed them." "Are you happy here?" Ryder asked, though he was almost afraid of the answer. "Very happy," Emma said, turning to look at him. "Happier than I thought possible. Ryder, I need to tell you something." His heart began to race. "What is it?" "I wrote to my brother a few weeks ago like I said I would. I got a response yesterday when I picked up supplies in town." She pulled a letter from her pocket. "He says Virginia City is no place for a single woman right now. There was a fire that destroyed half the town, and he is living in a tent while they rebuild. He says I should wait until spring at the earliest before coming, and even then he is not sure it is a good idea." "I see," Ryder said, not sure where this was going. "The thing is, I am not disappointed. I thought I would be, but I am not. I realize that I do not want to leave here." "I do not want to leave you." She took a deep breath. "I have fallen in love with you, Ryder Norwood. I do not know if that is too forward of me to say, but I cannot keep it inside anymore." For a moment, Ryder could not breathe, could not think. Then joy flooded through him, so intense it almost hurt. He stood up and pulled Emma to her feet, taking her hands in his. "Emma, I have been in love with you for weeks now. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated. But God, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your laughter. I love how you look at the world with such wonder. I love everything about you." She smiled up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Really, really. I was terrified you were going to leave, that I would lose you just when I had found you." "You are not going to lose me," Emma said. "Not if you do not want to." "I do not want to," Ryder said firmly. "I want you to stay forever. I want you to marry me if you will have me. Are you proposing?" "I am." "I know it is fast, and I know I do not have much to offer except a ranch house and a herd of cattle and my heart, but they are all yours if you want them." Emma laughed through her tears. "That is the best proposal I have ever received. Yes, Ryder. Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gently at first, then more deeply as she melted against him. It felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece he had not known he was looking for. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, both smiling like fools. "When?" Emma asked. "When should we get married?" "As soon as possible," Ryder said. "Tomorrow if we could, but I suppose we should do it properly. We can go into Granite next week and see the minister." "Next week sounds perfect." They went into town the following Monday, riding together in the wagon. Granite was a small mining town, rough around the edges but growing steadily. The main street had a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, and a small church at the far end. The minister, Reverend Thomas, was a kind man in his 50s who had known Ryder since he had first claimed his land. "Marriage," the Reverend exclaimed when Ryder told him why they had come. "Well, this is wonderful news. I had begun to think you would be a bachelor forever, Ryder." "So had I," Ryder admitted. "But then Emma came into my life and changed everything." They arranged for the ceremony to take place the following Saturday, giving Emma time to make a dress and for Ryder to invite the few friends he had in the area. Emma sent another letter to her brother, telling him the good news and promising to bring Ryder to meet him in the spring. That week passed in a flurry of activity. Emma worked on her dress, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored fabric they had bought at the general store. Ryder cleaned the house from top to bottom and even built a new dresser for their bedroom, wanting everything to be perfect. His ranch hands, Jake and Samuel, teased him good-naturedly about his nervousness, but they were clearly happy for him. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue. Ryder put on his best suit, a dark gray one he had bought years ago and rarely had occasion to wear, and rode into town with Jake and Samuel. Emma would come later with Mrs. Henderson, the wife of the general store owner, who had taken Emma under her wing and insisted on helping her get ready. The small church was packed with what seemed like half the town, people Ryder barely knew but who had come out of curiosity or friendliness or both. He stood at the front with the Reverend, his palms sweating and his heart racing, until he heard the door open and turned to see Emma. She was breathtaking. The cream dress fit her perfectly, showing off her small waist and the curve of her shoulders. She had pinned her hair up with small white flowers that Mrs. Henderson had provided, and she carried a simple bouquet of wildflowers. But it was her face that took his breath away, the pure joy and love shining in her eyes as she walked toward him. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Ryder was aware of saying his vows, of Emma saying hers, of sliding a simple gold band onto her finger. And then the Reverend was pronouncing them man and wife, and he was kissing her, and everyone was cheering. The townspeople had organized a reception of sorts in front of the church, with tables of food and a fiddler who struck up a lively tune. Ryder and Emma danced, laughing and stumbling a bit because neither of them was particularly graceful, but not caring one bit. They were surrounded by well-wishers, people shaking Ryder's hand and kissing Emma's cheek and offering congratulations. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and rode home together in the wagon, Emma leaning against Ryder's shoulder, his arm around her. "Mrs. Norwood," he said, testing out the name. "How does that sound?" "Perfect," Emma said. "It sounds absolutely perfect." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous but sure of their love. Ryder was gentle with Emma, mindful of her healed but still tender wound, and she responded with a passion that matched his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to the wind outside and the crackling of the fire in the other room. "I never thought I could be this happy," Emma whispered. "Neither did I," Ryder said, pulling her closer. "You have given me everything I did not know I wanted." The months that followed were full of hard work and deep contentment. Emma proved to be not just a good rancher's wife, but an excellent partner in every sense. She took over the financial records, which Ryder had been keeping haphazardly, and organized them properly. She started a larger garden and preserved vegetables for the winter. She even learned to help with branding and doctoring the cattle, though Ryder worried constantly about her safety. They made the trip to Virginia City in the spring to meet Emma's brother Robert, who was delighted to see his sister so happy and healthy. He and Ryder got along well, and Robert admitted that he was relieved Emma had found such a good situation instead of coming to the rough mining town. "I worried about you constantly," Robert told Emma as they sat in a restaurant in Virginia City. "When I heard about the attack on your wagon, I thought the worst. I sent inquiries everywhere, but no one knew what had happened to you." "I was very lucky," Emma said, smiling at Ryder. "Or blessed, depending on how you look at it." "I am just grateful you are alive and happy," Robert said. "And Ryder, I am glad she has you to look after her." "We look after each other," Ryder said, taking Emma's hand. That fall, Emma discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and not a little fear. The nearest doctor was in Granite, a day's ride away, and childbirth was always dangerous, especially out in the frontier. But Emma was healthy and strong, and Ryder was determined to do everything in his power to make sure she and the baby stayed that way. He brought Mrs. Henderson out to the ranch several times as Emma's pregnancy progressed, wanting to make sure everything was going well. The older woman had delivered many babies and assured them that Emma was doing fine. "Just keep doing what you are doing," she told them. "Good food, plenty of rest and not too much heavy work, and have faith. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." The winter was long and cold, but Ryder made sure the house was well stocked with firewood and supplies. He worried constantly about Emma, about what would happen if she went into labor during a blizzard when he could not get help. But Emma remained calm and practical. "Women have been giving birth in worse conditions than this for thousands of years," she reminded him. "We will be fine." In late March, on a night when the stars were brilliant in the clear sky, Emma went into labor. Ryder rode through the darkness to fetch Mrs. Henderson, terrified the entire way that something would go wrong. But when he returned with the older woman, Emma was handling everything with remarkable composure, timing her contractions and preparing the things they would need. The labor was long, lasting through the night and into the next day. Ryder stayed by Emma's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. He would have traded places with her in an instant if he could have, would have taken on all her pain if it meant she did not have to suffer. But Emma was strong, stronger than he had ever known. She bore the pain with courage and determination, and finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their son was born. Ryder held the tiny, squalling infant in his arms and felt tears streaming down his face. His son. He had a son. The baby was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and a healthy set of lungs. "He is beautiful," Emma said weakly from the bed, reaching for the baby. Ryder placed their son gently in her arms and sat beside them, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. "What should we name him?" he asked. Emma looked down at the baby, then up at Ryder. "What about Thomas? After the Reverend who married us, Thomas Norwood," Ryder said, testing it out. "I like it. Thomas, it is." Mrs. Henderson stayed for a week to help Emma recover and to make sure both mother and baby were doing well. By the time she left, Emma was up and moving around, though still tired, and little Thomas was nursing well and gaining weight. The ranch became a different place with a baby in it. The nights were broken by Thomas's cries, and the days revolved around feeding and changing and soothing. But Ryder had never been happier. He loved watching Emma with their son, the gentle way she held him and sang to him. He loved the feel of the tiny body sleeping on his chest, the absolute trust the baby had in them. As Thomas grew, so did the ranch. Ryder expanded the herd and built a larger barn. Emma's garden flourished, and she started selling her preserves in town, adding a bit to their income. Jake and Samuel became permanent employees, and Ryder built a small bunkhouse for them. 2 years after Thomas was born, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and she was as spirited as her brother was calm. The house rang with laughter and occasional tears, with the sounds of a family. On Grace's 2nd birthday, Ryder and Emma stood on their porch watching the children play in the yard under Jake's watchful eye. Emma was pregnant again, just beginning to show, and Ryder had his arm around her, his hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "Do you ever think about that day I found you?" Ryder asked. "About how different our lives could have been?" "All the time," Emma said. "If you had been checking a different part of your property, if you had found me 10 minutes later, if any number of things had been different, we would not be standing here right now." "I thank God every day that I found you," Ryder said. "You and the children, you are everything to me." "And you are everything to us," Emma said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "You saved my life that day, but you have given me so much more than that. You have given me a home, a family, a life full of love. I could not ask for anything more." They stood there together, watching their children play and the sun set over the land they had built together, and Ryder knew that he was the luckiest man alive. He had set out west seeking land and opportunity, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found love, real and deep and lasting. Years passed, and the ranch continued to thrive. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Grace was headstrong and brave, insisting on learning to rope and ride as well as any man. The 3rd child, a boy they named Samuel after one of their loyal ranch hands, was gentle and thoughtful, preferring books to cattle but still doing his share of the work. Emma never stopped writing. She filled journal after journal with observations about ranch life, about the people they met, about her children growing up. Some of her stories were published in Eastern magazines, and she became known as a chronicler of Western life. But she always said her greatest work was her family. As Ryder grew older, his hair turning silver and his hands becoming gnarled from years of hard work, he would often stand on his porch and look out at the land he had claimed all those years ago. It had given him everything, this wild, beautiful country. It had tested him and shaped him and ultimately rewarded him beyond measure. But the greatest gift Montana had given him was not the land itself. It was the blood-stained, unconscious woman he had found among the rocks one summer day, the woman who had become his wife, his partner, his love. Emma had transformed his house into a home, his solitary existence into a rich, full life. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The house had been expanded over the years, now sprawling with multiple bedrooms and a large dining room. The yard was full of friends and neighbors, people whose lives Ryder and Emma had touched over the years. As they stood together cutting the cake, Emma leaned close to Ryder and whispered, "If I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing. Not even getting shot," Ryder teased. Not even that, Emma said seriously, because it brought me to you. Ryder kissed her then in front of everyone, not caring who saw. After 25 years, he still loved her as much as he had that first moment he had realized what she meant to him. Maybe more, because now their love was deepened by years of shared experiences, of raising children together, of weathering storms both literal and figurative. As they grew older still, they watched their children start families of their own. Thomas married a sweet girl from town and took over most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Grace shocked everyone by becoming a school teacher, though she still helped with roundups when she could. Samuel went east to study law but came back every summer, drawn by the land and the family he loved. Emma's hair turned white, but her green eyes remained as bright and sharp as ever. Ryder's back grew stiff and he moved more slowly, but his mind remained keen. They spent their later years sitting on the porch together, watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had played, telling stories about the old days. When Ryder was 73, he fell ill with pneumonia. Emma nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she had shown in everything else, refusing to let him give up. He recovered, but he was weaker afterward, and they both knew his time was growing shorter. "I am not ready to lose you," Emma told him one night as they lay in bed together. "You are not going to lose me," Ryder said. "I will always be with you one way or another, but Emma, I need you to promise me something, anything. When I am gone, I want you to keep living. Really living, not just existing. You have so much life in you still. Promise me you will keep writing, keep spending time with the grandchildren, keep finding joy." "I promise," Emma said, though tears were streaming down her face. "But you have to promise me that you will fight as long as you can. I am not ready to say goodbye." "I will fight," Ryder promised. "For you, I will always fight." But 2 years later, on a crisp autumn morning much like the one when they had been married, Ryder died peacefully in his sleep, Emma's hand in his. He was 75 years old, and he had lived a good, full life. Emma grieved deeply, as anyone would after losing their partner of nearly 30 years. But she kept her promise. She continued to write, finishing a book about their life together that was published to great acclaim. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom. She tended the garden and even helped with ranch work when she was able. On what would have been their 30th wedding anniversary, Emma rode out to the place where Ryder had found her all those years ago. The rocks were still there, weathered and unchanged. She dismounted and stood there for a long time, remembering that desperate, frightened young woman who had thought she was going to die. She could see the whole arc of her life from this vantage point, how that terrible day had led to the most beautiful life she could have imagined. How the worst moment had become the catalyst for the best moments. How being broken and lost had led her to being whole and found. "Thank you," she said aloud, not sure if she was talking to God or fate or Ryder himself. "Thank you for that day. Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." The wind whispered through the grass, carrying her words away, and Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had loved and been loved. She had built a life of meaning and purpose. She had raised good children who were raising good children of their own. The ranch would continue long after she was gone, a living legacy of what she and Ryder had created together. Emma lived to be 82 years old, sharp and active until the very end. When she died, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words were, "Tell Ryder I am coming home." She was buried next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large pine tree. Their graves stood side by side, the headstones simple but bearing an inscription that Thomas had chosen. Together in life, together in eternity. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down from parent to child, each generation adding their own touches but maintaining the core of what Ryder and Emma had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most beautiful blessings. In the house, in a place of honor, Emma's journals were kept, a record of a life well lived and a love that had endured everything. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, the descendants of Ryder and Emma swore they could hear laughter from the porch, the sound of two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something eternal. The land remembered them, the house remembered them, and most importantly, the family they had created remembered them. Not as perfect people, but as real people who had worked hard and loved deeply and left the world better than they had found it. And it had all started with one moment, one decision, one man who had followed a trail of blood and found not death, but life in its richest, fullest form. Ryder Norwood had been seeking land when he came west, but what he found was so much more. He found purpose, family, and a love that transcended even death itself. In the end, that was the real story of the ranch, not the cattle or the land or the buildings, but the love that had built it and sustained it. The love between a man who had chosen to care for a dying stranger and the woman who had survived because of his kindness. A love that had started in blood and pain and had grown into something beautiful and enduring. And so the legacy continued, generation after generation, each one carrying forward the values that Ryder and Emma had instilled. Hard work, compassion, courage, and above all, love. The Wild West had been a hard place, an unforgiving place, but it had also been a place where people like Ryder and Emma could build something lasting, something that would outlive them by generations. Their story was not unique in its broad strokes. Many people had come west seeking new lives. Many had found love in unexpected places. Many had built ranches and raised families. But every love story is unique to the people living it. And to Ryder and Emma, their story had been everything. From that first moment when Ryder had knelt beside an unconscious, bleeding woman and decided to save her life, to the last moment decades later when Emma had closed her eyes for the final time with her family around her. Every moment had been part of a larger tapestry, a life woven together from choices and chances, hardship and joy, loss and love. The Montana sky still stretched endless and blue over the ranch. The grass still grew tall and golden. The cattle still grazed on the hills. But now, every sunset that painted the clouds red and gold was a reminder of the love story that had unfolded there, of two people who had found each other when they needed each other most, and had built a life that would echo through time. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, Ryder and Emma were together again, finally reunited, their love story continuing in a place where there was no more pain, no more separation, only the eternal joy of being together. Because that was what they had proven in their years together on earth, that real love does not end. It transforms, it grows, it continues. And in the hearts of those who came after them, in the land they had worked and the home they had built, Ryder and Emma's love lived on, as vital and alive as it had been on that day so long ago when a cowboy had found an injured woman on his land and had chosen to save her life, never knowing he was really saving his own.